Welcome back. This afternoon, we have a panel discussion, Science Communication in the Digital Age, Reaching and Engaging a Wider Audience. The panel features Prof. Ciechanover, Prof. Sir Konstantin Novoselov, Prof. Dame Sue Black, and Prof. Sir Tim Han. Moderating the panel today will be Dr. Juliana Chan, publisher of the Asian Scientist magazine and CEO of Asia's leading STEM-focused media company, Wildtype Media Group. Please warmly welcome the panel and our moderator. I'll now hand the time over to Dr. Chan, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first panel of the season. And boy, are we all in for a treat. For the next 90 minutes, we will be listening to 4 distinguished experts talk about science communication in a digital age, moderated by me, Juliana Chan. So, to begin with, I thought I would ask all of you a question. And that question is, what do you think the most important role of a scientist is? And you may say, of course, to unlock knowledge. Maybe it could be through discovering completely new material, a new molecule, a new pathway, a new identification method. But I posit that it goes beyond unlocking knowledge in the lab and through our research, but also by unlocking knowledge through disseminating that information to our communities around us. It could be something like helping a mom and dad decide what to buy for their children in the supermarket, what to feed their family. Or it could be finding ways to live our lives more environmentally consciously, more sustainably. Or in some countries, it also could be helping the people decide who to vote for. Because it has been shown in certain administrations that some of them are more scientifically literate than others, which affects our lives. So we are fortunate that in Singapore, we have a pretty scientifically literate government and also very supportive, which is how we have the Global Young Scientists Summit for more than a decade. Just want to let you know I've been part of this summit since year -1. And I can tell you when it began, I was pregnant with my first child and she's in grade 5. She's primary 5. So that's how long this conference has been. So I thought we should give the organizers a round of applause for round of applause for putting science communication first and foremost. And that's probably why this is the first panel of the week. So now I want to talk about, I thought I could introduce the speakers, but then I realized that they do not need my support because they are excellent science communicators. So I want to ask each and every one of you to introduce yourselves by means of telling a memorable or tender story of science communication. Perhaps we could start with Professor Dame Sue Black.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yours.
Thank you. I'm a forensic scientist, and so every time I go into the courtroom, my job is to explain science to the public because the public are the members of the jury. So I suspect we'll come back to the courtroom for the example. But the one that I'd like to give here is a group of young students at the upper end of school before they're heading off to university or other parts in life. And we have a little afternoon session of introducing them to the aspects of forensic anthropology and anatomy, which is what I do. And they had a skeleton in their closet. I know that sounds as if it's made up, but they genuinely did have a skeleton in the cupboard, which is a teaching skeleton. And so we took the skeleton out of the cupboard and we laid it out, and we spent the afternoon thinking about who was this person. We identified that they were a male. We identified they were between 19 and 22 years of age. They were about 5'5" to 5'7" inches in height and probably had an Indian background. We were able to look at the diseases and the trauma that they'd had. And by the end of that day, what was really important was the change in the room. When we started in that afternoon, it was a pile of dry bones. And when I asked them what they now wanted to do with these remains, they were conflicted because now they weren't just dry, disassociated bones. They were the remains of a person, and a person that they could relate to. And for me, that's the importance of communication, is about being able to bring you into the space with somebody, to change your thought, to change your attitude. They weren't happy to put the skeleton back in the cupboard, which I thought was quite interesting. I'm not sure quite what they did with it, I have to say, but it didn't go back into the cupboard.
Did they name it? Did they name the skeleton?
They didn't give a name. And the reason we don't do that is that in a forensic world, you can only assign the name the person is given. If you create one, you're creating an alternative identity in some ways. So we try to stay away from the personal side of identification, just the biological side. But just to see the change in that room that afternoon about people who didn't care what was in front of them to suddenly people really caring what happened from that point forward. And I know they did go on and have the discussions on whether those remains should be buried or something else should happen to them, but they'd gone beyond that point of it being an inanimate set of dead objects.
Love that story. Thank you, Sue. Now, can we have Professor Sir Tim Hunt introduce himself with a story? It doesn't have to be a big and bombastic event. Something
No, it's not a big
memorable.
and bombastic event. So I want to tell a story of what I suppose is failure. That is to say, what I call the ambassador problem. Now, every so often in the past, I've given a talk in front of the ambassador. The one I particularly remember, I think, was in Bangkok, our man in Bangkok. Now, the thing is, the British ambassadors, they're never scientists, right? They might be historians, they might be philosophers, they might be politicians. I don't quite know who they are anyway, but they're certainly, I don't think a single one of them probably is a scientist of any possible description. Anyway, so I give my talk, my standard talk, and at the end, the ambassador, I should say, however, the ambassadors are unfailingly intelligent and charming. And the ambassador comes up at the end and said, "Tim, that was a marvelous talk," he said, "but I didn't understand a word of it." And what I never understand is what the ambassador doesn't understand about biology, and I wish I did, because, you know, I think it's a serious problem, and obviously a failing in me that you know. On the other hand, he thought it was a marvelous talk, so was he just being polite? I don't know. Another sort of example of that, actually, is a great friend of mine was instrumental in developing the confocal microscope. And Brad has an incredibly deep knowledge of optics and computer programs and all the stuff. I mean, it's not a simple thing to make a confocal microscope, and it was a big advance. And he gave a talk in one of those Royal Society lectures where you're supposed to sort of, be communicating science to the general public. And I had exactly the same feeling as the ambassador, actually, because Brad is great, and he told the story of how he developed it. But of the science, I didn't understand a word he said. It was way beyond my comprehension, but I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. So there's something funny going on here about communication, and I don't really understand what it is. And finally, let me say, very often, I almost always fall asleep in scientific talks. Now, this is really strange if you think about it. I mean, I think it's inherited. My father used to fall asleep in sermons, and it was absolutely amazing. The guy would sort of get up, start his sermon, my father's head would go boom. And then the minute he said, and the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, whoop, he would sort of come back to life again. I'm a bit the same with scientific, but it's really weird. There is somebody describing the whole essence of their being, the thing that really absorbs them day to day, time after time, and it's incredibly boring. Why? Bizarre. So maybe we can get to that.
Well, Tim, I used confocal microscopes all through my PhD, and I must say I still don't understand them 5 years later. Well, let's introduce our next speaker, Professor Konstantin Novoselov. I practice, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me support you on this, on the failure story, because honestly, most of my science communications are the failure stories. But here, I'm too proud of myself to tell mine. So let me tell you from my colleagues. So we were doing at that time we were making gecko tape. So those geckos which can climb in Singapore is just everywhere. So and we produce an artificial material which use the same principle of adhesion. So this way, it's everywhere. It's called the dry adhesives, and people use it. And so we were doing this with my teacher and colleague and very good friend Andrei Gaim, and then suddenly, for the first time, we were called to the television. And so Channel 4 in England called, and why won't you join us for the morning program or all about invention? And we should have got a bit alerted. Channel 4 morning program, but okay, we were just so carried away with all this dry adhesives. Okay, sure. And then so Andrei appears on this morning show, and immediately from the very first minute, you could see the complete discrepancy and discontinuation between science communication and normal people communication. So Channel 4 morning show, your joke should be 5 words maximum, half a sentence, not more. So I mean, Klaus here knows Andrei very well. Incredibly fantastic sense of humor. He couldn't manage a single joke on the TV. He was interrupted every time, so that they changed topic because the dynamics of the television communication is completely different than our typical lectures where you're about to snooze a little bit and then wake up and continue. And it was basically quite a torture, honestly, to watch. So Andrei is getting red already because he had all these fantastic jokes, and he's not capable to say any single one of them. And these young anchors, they just running around him and just say completely idiotic things, stupid jokes. But okay, that's the Channel 4 standards. And we almost came to the explosion point, but then it was the end of the program, luckily. And then they made a mistake. They said, okay, now let us ask you, what is your favorite invention? And they asked him to prepare a few, and I know that he prepared a few, but then he was so pissed off with them already, he pulled the one which was, I don't know why he even taken it with him. It's the real invention. And the invention was a centrifuge to produce abortions under high G. So I don't know who invented this, but it's you can check it. And he showed it on in the real life television on Channel 4 like this. So now it was their turn to become red, and then it was the end of the program very quickly. So
I don't think Andre would like TikTok very much then. You know, our panels about communication in a digital age, they say that on TikTok you have pretty much 1 second to hook someone's attention before they scroll away. So he wouldn't be good on TikTok, would he? No. Thank you so much. And off to our last speaker, Professor Aaron Ciechanover. Please share with us a story.
Well, I think this is kind of a teaser to the real interview, isn't it? About our experience. Well, science communication is awfully important, and I assume that we are going to talk about how important it is. I just want to give you 2 small examples of what I faced initially about science communication. So the first thing, after we got the announcement of the Nobel Prize, I was interviewed by numerous journalists and television networks and so on. Nobody could care less about what we did. Why we got it? Nothing. No question. What are you going to do with the money? I'm going to pay the mortgage of my apartment. What I'm going to buy to my wife, this and that and that and that. Nothing. They couldn't care less. The climax, however, was that I got a call from the Israeli television in English. And again, they asked me, what about the prize, whether I was surprised, and they wanted the interview to be in English. So I told them I don't speak English. It's okay. I mean, she accepted it like it's for granted. You know, you can get a prize in chemistry, writing 250 papers, showing up in conferences, but you don't speak English. So we started to negotiate. I told her that I'll give the interview in Hebrew. And she said, no, it will be complicated because we have to translate it into English and it will take time. So then I said to her, you know, I have an idea. I know that my mentor, Avram Hershko, shared the prize with me. He does speak English. So why won't you call him? So she called him. So we stopped the whole thing. She called him. The next day, Avram came to the lab and he said, Aaron, what's going on with you? Somebody called me and said that you don't speak English and they wanted the interview from me. That just show you how serious these people are. You really try to be nice and to explain them what you really did. In order, what is the achievement, why it's important for people, what drugs were developed, and the whole negotiation that she still can imagine that somebody, you know, who shows internationally, gets international prize, doesn't speak one word in English. And she took it for granted.
A good tip if you want to turn down an interview that you don't speak English. Well, okay, thank you for introducing yourselves with a very tender story. That's interesting. I would like to tell the audience that I will be moving on to a Q&A phase after a couple of questions. Rest assured, I'm not going to hog the mic. So get ready, and we will open those 2 mics for you shortly, and we have a running mic as well. Now, I want to go on to a question of mine, my own question, and it's an existential question for me. Big one. So for 15 years, I was a scientist. Like yourselves, I was young once. 20 years ago, I was at Cambridge University, and I did my undergrad, my PhD, and then I moved on to be a postdoc and later an assistant professor at a local university medical school. So throughout this entire time, I was absolutely for science communication. But how much do you think, professors, we can expect a young scientist to be spending their time on science communication? They already are, overworked, overburdened with the endless treadmill of academia, from publishing papers to keeping their age index, citation score, whatever it is, up. Is it too much to ask them to add one more item onto their laundry list? Would any of the professors want to take this question?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a bit much. I mean, the business of the business of science is finding stuff out.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, if you find something out, you should tell the world about it for sure.
Agreed.
But you don't have to couch it in ways that the general public can understand, because the important people in your audience are your peers, seems to me. And so I think there has been a bit of overemphasis on explaining. I mean, the best explainer of science that I ever came across was this guy, Bill Bryson, who wrote this wonderful book called, I think, The Theory of Absolutely Everything, or something like that. He's not a scientist, never been a scientist, wouldn't pretend to be a scientist, but an absolutely fantastic science communicator. So I think, science communication is a skill which some people have and most of us don't.
So are you saying that we don't need all of us to do it? Maybe a small percentage of us doing that?
I think what you've got is you've got a range of colors in the paint box, and we're not asking everybody to be the same color in the paint box. Some people will want to be in a laboratory, never leave it, never communicate, never tell anybody anything that goes on in there. And others will want to go out and blossom in front of a television camera or a microphone or whatever it may be, and there will be the full range between them. I think it's for people to find where they're comfortable, or if they want to push themselves into an area where perhaps they're outside their comfort zone, it's a place to learn. So I don't think we all have to be wonderful communicators, but I think we should have the choice and we should have the opportunities if we wish.
And if you like doing it, do it.
Yes, but if you're going to fail spectacularly. Do it really badly. I did it last night. I had dinner last night and I sat on table 1 and I said to the gentleman next to me, "Tell me, what do you do for a living?" And he said, "I'm the Deputy Prime Minister."
No, but in
Welcome
Singapore,
to
we are
my
very
world.
curious, what the hell is he doing?
Why aren't you running the country? Why are you at dinner with me? Yeah.
I run this country, basically.
But maybe I can try to turn it from the other side. So let's look at it from the different perspective. I think it's absolutely right expression that if you cannot explain what you are doing to a 5-year-old, then you are not a good scientist. And I think, and personally, I mean, I'm not sure about 5-year-old, but from time to time, it really helps me if I go to my colleague, doesn't matter exactly the same field or just or just some adjacent field. And I start explaining what exactly am I doing right now, because when you just how our brain works, when you start articulating your hypothesis, when you start articulating your the problems with your experiments, you actually don't allow yourself to skip and some of the difficult questions. Nothing hidden under the carpet. You don't cut corners. This is the trick which I actually use quite a lot, because it really helps me to straighten my mind, and then sometimes it helps to find the solution. So I think from time to time, asking our students, postdocs, or colleagues to write 5-sentence summary, so someone could, a layman could understand, would be a good practice. And I think it's I mean, we do it when we write abstracts for the conferences, but maybe we need to practice it more often. It's not only for the communication; it's actually for ourselves. But then I am absolutely right. Some will love it, and it will take them 3 minutes to come up with something, and some would struggle. And the first one are the communicators, and the others one would become the prime ministers maybe.
They say you don't really understand a topic until you can teach it, so that's a good way to test it. Aaron.
First of all, I think it's our obligation to go out, because most of the universities in the world are public universities. The money is coming from the public, and we owe it to the public. It's a debt. We have to pay this debt. We are not sitting in an ivory tower and just do what we want to do without reporting to the public. So that's about the general public. And I think that even as a young scientist, with all the obligations and the burdens you have, taking 1 day in a month and going to an elementary school and talk to the kids is again an obligation. Actually, it's a pleasure, I think. I have done it forever. It's not taking much time. It's true that for young scientists and even for established one, you don't make a discovery every day, certainly not a breakthrough discovery. But there is a lot to talk to. Think about the last 3 years. Think about what happened with COVID-19. A true revolution. The messenger RNA vaccine is a true different concept that we have known before. The implication for the messenger RNA vaccination are far-reaching for cancer, for other diseases. We can explain it to the kids. We don't have to do it ourselves in the lab. But they themselves witnessed COVID-19. They were enclosed at home, isolated. They know what it is, or at least they experienced part of it. So explaining it to them will broaden their, and as you said, some will catch it like that. Some will struggle with it, but at least something will precipitate in the brains. How else everybody complained that young people are not attracted to science, that they are not coming to science anymore. How else we want to attract them if not by coming and talking to them and explaining them the beauty of it, the wonders of it, the colorful of it. I mean, that's the way to do it, to attract them from a very early age. For me, it's both an obligation and a pleasure.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm glad you brought up the word obligation, because a lot of my research in the past was taxpayer funded, most of it really. And there's so many stories to tell about COVID. I must share a story now that you mentioned the vaccines. When I was a graduate student in Bob Langer's lab, this is in MIT, some of my colleagues were working on this lipidoid library, which is a synthetic lipid library of thousands and thousands of chemically synthesized lipids. And one of this is what was used to formulate the Moderna vaccine. So it's just watching it go from somebody next to you to being injected everywhere. So it's just a real scientific breakthrough and discovery. And that story could be told, really, by anyone. Well, on this note, I want to ask one more question before I open it up to the floor. And this is to share with you actually some data that I, while in my previous life as a scientist, collected and published. And this was a nationwide survey of 1,000 people in Singapore with my colleague Shirley Ho, a science communicator at NTU. And this was representative of the Singapore population, Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others. And we were trying to assess the public sentiment to science and technology issues in Singapore. By the way, my panelists have not seen the data. This is me just telling them what I discovered. And this is what we discovered. Of all my respondents, 81% of them strongly agreed that they would like to talk to the government on science and technology issues. By government, it could be civil servants, it could be politicians, 81%. But only 57% of them wanted to talk to the scientists, us, on science and technology issues. Now, I was just doing my own analysis and I thought, could it be that they don't know a single scientist? Or if they did, they didn't know how to reach us? Or, as you mentioned, Aaron, we are in an ivory tower, we are inaccessible. So how do we make ourselves less intimidating, more accessible, such that more people want to talk to us? Now, this survey was in 2015, but I can't imagine it would be any better right now. Would any of my panelists like to take this question? How do we make the 57% go to 81%? That's really my question.
I don't have an explanation, but at least a possible hint why is that it would take quite a switch of a language to talk to a journalist and to write a scientific paper. You write a scientific paper, okay, there is a new electronic topological state found in this material, and then the journalists come, and how are you going to use it in 10 years' time? I don't know. I have no idea. No, but you have thought about this. What kind of implication? And then they push and push and push, and then they say, but say for quantum computing, would they? So, and you say yes, probably yeah. But if I write anything like this in the scientific paper, I'm screwed, right? So it's let's say that's the end of my career forever. So I would never be able. It's my internal consciousness won't allow me, but my colleagues would kill me on the spot. But it's a different switch. It's not complete lie, but it's so many yes and no and unknowns, and I will be retired already, and no one is going to check on this. So that's and the question is, where is this? How much further can we be carried away and with this simplification? And we're not trained for this, and so we're trained for the rigorous science, and it's everything inside me is against this simplification. At the same time, I understand that I need to package this information in a special manner, and this repackaging is usually well done by some good scientific communicators, some good scientific journalists. Bad scientific journalists, they actually do quite a lot of damage as well.
I see. So you're saying a little bit of code switching, also learn how to package the information that we have that is more accessible? Is that it?
Because the amount of background knowledge for the general public and for scientists are different, and we perceive it in a different manner. So because I produce this electronic state, and then I start to think, okay, what's about interactions there? What's about if I add some other parameters? General public think, okay, how can we change? How it will change our life? I mean, we also think how it will change my life. Will I get another prize with it or not? But it's a different perspective, right? So so we need to. If you want to communicate to a public, you need to start thinking like general public.
Like thinking from their point of view and answering that from their point of view. Aaron, you had talked previously in the media about fostering trust between different stakeholders and the scientists. Do you have anything to add?
I think that what you mentioned is that the public wants immediate answer. They want, are you studying cancer? When cancer will be cured? You have to explain them, first of all, that cancer is not a disease. There are about 500 different cancers, if not more. Some are not malignant, some are awfully malignant, and so on and so forth. Second, in order to understand cancer, we have to understand how cells are divided. Because if we don't understand how cells are divided, we shall never understand how a tumor is generated. In order to understand how cells are divided, we need to understand how DNA is doubling itself. So there are steps. We have to explain them, and people appear to be, they don't have patience. They don't understand that science is moving step by step. There is no magic way to jump over steps of understanding and get to the solution. Solutions are coming. You can tell them about antibiotics, about vaccines. The world now is much healthier than it used to be, the Western world. But nevertheless, we cannot solve a problem without solving all the intermediate problems in between. And the journalists are even pushing, because the journalists, they want the paper to be sold. They want sexy, flashy, bloody, whatever they want. They want an immediate, tell us.
They want
Why
clickbait.
it's important what do you do? Why the public is wasting the money on you? So are you going to find a solution? They don't understand that knowledge is much broader, and things are interacting with, issues are interacting with one another and bring to one another, and even curiosity, just to understand the universe, is very, very important to understand where we live, because we shall never understand climate change without understanding the atmosphere, without understanding greenhouse gases, without understanding what's going on around. It's the knowledge that accumulates at the end of the day for the benefit of human beings. So I think that we need to educate the people that science is not a blitz. It's not something, you know, we need patience in order to go step by step by step by step.
Yeah, but so that's exactly right. But then we are talking about general education and increasing the level of awareness of science in the public, not about communicating one particular fact. So we need this. So we can put those spicy, nice articles, and it's like small needles in the landscape of the science. But we need to raise the overall level, and this is going much beyond just public communication. Same problem with the politicians. We need to explain that unfortunately science is not done on the 5-year election cycle. So it's much longer term story.
But I think, I mean, there is another point here, which is that some science is genuinely exceedingly difficult to understand. I mean, for example, quantum physics, I have almost no insight, whereas you, it's bread and butter, right?
Those guys, they were communicating 3 days ago, so just...
And, you know, and vice versa. I think, you know, when it comes to biology, the physicists all want them to be nice, simple in an equation, and it's much more complicated than that, and you have to think about it in a different kind of way. So it's, in a way, it's sort of, it's unreasonable to say, you know, the public should all understand science, because what particular bit of science should it be that they understand?
Well, you see, that's probably one of the well-kept secret in science, that scientist don't know everything.
You know nothing.
So exactly. Well, that's the next step.
Nothing.
Yeah, so that scientists know almost nothing, and it's the. I mean, it took me, I don't know how many years to realize that that medicine is not really science. It's still very, very experimental, just practice. It's not even even science. So you go to the hospital and they start to experiment on this until they find the right cure. So in science is the same, even worse. And that's probably just explaining how the real world works and how science works would be very, very useful.
You know,
then we would just crash our own ivory tower.
I was going to agree with Tim, because my philosophy is, if you want to talk to another scientist in a different field, you just got to pitch it at high school level, because my physics is pretty much high school level at this point.
Mine isn't even that.
It's one of the maxims that we use in the courtroom. So in the courtroom, you are probably the only scientist in that room, because the judge is not a scientist, the lawyers are not scientists, the jury are not. And what we're always told is, remember, the last time the jury probably studied science, they were in school. And so we have to be able to convey our science in a language that is simple. But what's interesting about the jury is, if you say to the jury, our next witness is a scientist, they go, oh, because they think, you know, they have this vision in their head of someone in a white coat with a very large brain, and they think, I'm not going to understand a word they say. But if you say to them, our next witness is a forensic scientist, they think, oh, that'll be interesting. So whatever the image that forensic science has developed through the media, which is about as far removed from reality as possible, has changed the concept of the jury's understanding. Forensic scientists are approachable and interesting. Other scientists are beyond their understanding.
Is it because of Grey's Anatomy, or just, or is it so? Dr. House was the what's the reason?
I mean, some of the forensic programs are on a par with Star Trek fantasy, but at the end of the day, they're not about education; they're about entertainment. And so I can remember a brilliant episode that was sent to my students on a CD for them to review. And it was an American series that's called Bones. Yes. And so what they have is they have this marvelous box in the middle of the room that is the sort of holographic something or another. So they find the remains of a newborn baby. They put the skull of the baby in the box. What the box does is it, through mathematical algorithms, grows the skull to an adult size. They then place a face over it, and so reconstruct the face. They walk out of the lab and walk into a woman who looks exactly like the baby that they've just aged, because it's their mother. And you think, on whose planet is that ever going to be science? It's fiction. So separating the science fiction from the science fact is a problem for us in the courtroom, because people go into the courtroom thinking, I am forensically aware because I've watched CSI Miami and Dexter and Bones or whatever these things
Love
are.
Dexter.
And they're really not. We are a huge disappointment when we eventually get onto the stand, because we're just like all the other scientists.
At least they want to hear from you. I think that's a good start. And at this point, I want to open it up to the floor. Does anyone have a question for our four speakers? Here's a mic for you. Please walk up to the mic. While we are waiting, I would like to encourage you to give us your name and your university, maybe even where you're from if you're from a different country. Be nice to find out
And
where
what kind of
all
a
you're
scientist you are.
from. That's right, yeah. What
Good
kind of
one.
background? To give us some context. Maybe the lady first.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Yixuan from the Mechanobiology Institute of NUS. So I'm a biological scientist. And when communicating science to general public, what I find really hard to deal with are the controversies of science. So as scientists, we understand the controversies. We know there are very fine constraints and details that might change everything. But the general public had a very difficult time conceptualizing these. And then in the digital time, it makes things worse because people can eventually, dig really deep into the CV of the people making the announcing the information, and they really try hard to prove one of them is a fraud because they have controversial informations. So knowing the science behind all of these controversies and uncertainties, how can we try to make the situation better? So that's my question.
Thank you. So how to deal with controversial science and explain it?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, one of the things I've always felt is that most of the time, in my experience, one is operating in a fog of uncertainty. And people don't often say that, actually, but it's true. I'm sure. Most of the time you really don't know what's going on. And which is life, right? I mean, most of the time you don't really know what you're going to have for breakfast necessarily. I don't know.
For me as well, it's about evidence, and I will keep going back to the courtroom. I do apologize, but it is about the evidence that says the evidence is what it is. It's how we interpret it, and in our legal system, it's an adversarial legal system. So one side of the courtroom wants to say that you are the world's leading expert who can explain everything. The other side of the courtroom wants to prove you're an idiot. And one side of the courtroom will win. And I've been both. I've been the expert and I've been the idiot, because there's an extra factor thrown in there, which is the person who is questioning you and the way that the questions go. So being prepared, I think, is the most important thing that you can do, and stick with the evidence. Don't go beyond your area of expertise. That's where danger lies, when you start to hypothesize on something that you really shouldn't be having an opinion on because you perhaps don't understand it to the detail that you should. And maybe in our world we're a little bit more constrained, but we will stay away from the media and we will not talk about controversies in the media, because when we go into the courtroom, the next time the defense barrister will say, on Channel 4 last week, you said this. Do you still agree? And so our life as a scientist is permanently under scrutiny by the media, by the alternative side in the courtroom that is going to question you. So we try and stay away from controversy.
I love that. So stick to the facts, don't embellish it, and talk about things that you're an expert on,
But
right?
actually,
Not things that you aren't.
I think it's probably quite important for us to admit that there are controversies and there are some unsolved problems in science, because because the modern media shows that we are progressing science so fast and we understand pretty much everything. Now there are a few unsolved problems still left, so we still need 10 years to make the quantum computer, and then that's it. So okay, maybe cancer as well. That's so only so many unsolved questions are there. I think we need to admit that we actually know so little, because this actually creates a big problem. Students come to us and say, "Oh, I want to work on this very new story, because that's where the breakthroughs actually might happen anywhere, because we really know so little."
Konstantin, I think you're right. I think speaking in absolutes can be quite dangerous, because sometimes they're not binary. There's a lot we don't know, and there's gray in between. Do you have something to add?
I think about this question, we have to explain to the people that science is a quickly and ever-moving enterprise. So what we saw yesterday with a microscope that magnifies thousandfold is not what we see today with the microscope that can overcome the wavelength, the super-resolution microscope. So what we thought yesterday is that cell is not the cell of today. It's moving. So that's for the curiosity. But from time to time, people get stuck. They get to a blind, kind of blind end, let's say a disease that is, science cannot help them. Medicine cannot help them. And then what they do, they turn to God, which is okay, which is really okay. And people tell me from time to time, I don't believe in science, but I believe in God. And I tell them that's what you should do, because science is not a religion. Science is a set of testable hypotheses that either we are successful in proving them and turn them into the truth of today, not necessarily the truth of tomorrow, or we are failing. So it's not a church. We are not going to church for doing science. Church has its own place. The only danger in turning to God, that in many countries, including in my own, the religious establishment tries to keep the religious people away from science and away from knowledge in order to keep the power in their hand. They promote ignorance purposefully in order to keep power. And that's the danger of turning to God. Believing in God, it's okay. Everybody has his own or her own God. That's okay. Because science really, the untold secret is that we know less than we think we know. Actually, we know almost nothing there, but we do know and we do advance. So that's the danger of this impatience of the public.
Thank you, Aaron. And then we take another question from the gentleman over there. Name and university, please.
Hi, my name is Maysam Yousefi, and I'm a PhD student in Duke US here in Singapore. So my question is actually related to the previous question, but instead of controversial topics, my question is about misinformation and when it is deliberate. And we have seen, especially as you mentioned about the COVID era, it was a big problem. And another problem is that most of the time, at least in recently, it's not coming from people who are actually not scientists. These people that are spreading this misinformation, they actually have the degrees, they have PhDs, they have MDs, and but their point of view might kind of deliberately be different from what the science and what the data is shown people. It could be because of different motivations, but the real problem is that in some countries we see that they're actually gaining power. They can influence on regulatory, on politics, and what can we do to this problem as scientists, as we want to stay to.
Thank you for your question. So I think the question is, how can we counter misinformation? As you know, this panel is about digital information, and you can see how it can run rampant online.
Yeah, let me just pick up on this one. It's an awfully important issue. It's misinformation and disinformation. We saw it during COVID-19. I think that I mentioned it briefly in my talk about President Trump trying to promote hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, pushing aside Anthony Fauci, his expert, to the side, rolling him down the stairs, and so on and so forth. It's really a big problem, and I think that the social networks disserve the public. I mean, it's a disservice to the public. But the question is a balanced one, because what about freedom of speech? Think about Elon Musk and selling of Twitter and Facebook and what's going on there. You know, how much you limit the damage that the social networks are doing to the public versus the freedom of speech. And, you know, we are not going to discuss it now, but it's a very delicate balance, what should be allowed and what should not be allowed by the social network that everybody holds in their pocket in the form of a cell phone. So yes, it's a real problem. Fake news and, you know, information that is spread and disseminated like a fire in a summer day. And I don't think that we have a solution. Scientists can defend it, can show up, can advertise, but you know, it looks like an uphill battle, an everlasting uphill battle.
You know, on that note, Aaron, what really frustrated me with that whole episode was the one with the loudest voice, with the most followers, gets to set the agenda and say what's right and wrong. And it was such an uphill battle for science communicators around the world. You know, all over the world, we were trying to combat misinformation, disinformation. I ran numerous panels with, you know, all the big pharmas, AstraZeneca, J&J, Pfizer, all of them. And you just can't fight one tweet. And that tweet is so harmful. Yes, it was very frustrating.
Yeah, I don't have any solution. Completely agree that it's a problem, and it's the balance between the freedom of speech and so it's this relativism of the view. It's becoming more and more popular. But of course, there is one solution, and the solution is science. And there is a huge, of course, in science we have a lot of misinformation as well. And there are famous story of fake data, and those surviving for years and years and so on. But somehow science managed to clean itself up. So it's you know how they say the Eugen Wigner, the unreasonable efficiency of mathematics is the unreasonable efficiency of science against miscommunication. How it can be mirrored and translated on the real communication, on the general communication, I don't know.
Let's take another question and let's move on so we can have more questions from the audience. This gentleman here, please.
Hi, my name is Yong Ray, and I'm a PhD student at UC San Diego. I do theoretical chemistry. So my question is related to the earlier question about social media. And as we know, there's a lot of science communicators who have podcasts about science on Facebook and Twitter. A lot of scientists ourselves have also gained a presence on social media. And so I'm curious about your thoughts about that, and how much as scientists should we be involved in social media, or should we leave all of that to the science communicators?
Do you have a presence on social media? Are you a science
I have it on Facebook. I don't have it on X, Twitter, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to ask everyone to follow you.
I don't post anything about science though.
Okay. Well, if any science communicator in the room later, why don't you come up and tell us your Twitter or Instagram handle so that all of us can follow you? Yeah. But your question is, should scientists, you know, step up and have a social media presence?
Yes, and what should we post? How much should we post?
Oh gosh, who wants to go for this? Why don't I take it? Why don't I take it? Why don't I take this one? Because I know all the cool science communicators online, you know. Well, it really depends on your interest. Like, for example, do any of you know Ed Yong? He used to be with The Atlantic. He's the best science communicator. He writes books. He writes really, really important articles. If you are a writer, then write. And if you prefer, you know, communicating on video, then go on TikTok, go on Instagram, and show up. You know, I know someone called I Love Science at Science Bay, Lab Shenanigans. These are all awesome science communicators. Danny is a scientist. You know, there's a few of them. So my answer is, please do it. There's not enough of us. to combat one very prolific tweeter out there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have an Instagram,
Oh, yes.
but it's mainly cats there. But both of my subscribers like it. So
We could have a mashup of cats and science communication. That would be very fun. Yeah, memes especially. The next gentleman over there.
Good afternoon, professors. My name is Adolphus Lai, and I'm currently based in the National University of Singapore. I'm currently a research fellow in the Singapore Nuclear Research Institute. I work on risk and uncertainty quantification. And my question is essentially, in light of recent events such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent controlled discharge of radioactive waters from the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, it brings about the importance, no doubt, about the essence of risk science communication. And I'd like to ask, in your opinion, what more can be done to improve efforts towards the risk science communication to the public?
Well, especially with the nuclear, I think it's the science communication won't help here. We need the education here. So we saw how not only general public, but the whole countries were subjected by this, by the hysteria of either COVID or the nuclear disasters. So, and it cannot be solved with just a few tweets. I think it's really down to roots. So it has to be implanted in schools, the understanding of science and the understanding of technology.
I want to make a point that I mentioned my survey from 2015. We asked them questions about nuclear energy, and we don't have that much knowledge in Singapore, so all the answers were wrong about risk on that topic. Yeah, so education is clearly needed, as you mentioned. Aaron.
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting question, and I'll just comment on one related to COVID-19, and that's vaccination hesitancy. Because it's, again, an issue of the public, and people think that it's a matter of ignorance, that people don't believe. They think that the messenger RNA is a genetic material, it will change the repertoire of DNA, there will be abortions, infertility, all the disinformation that was disseminated. It's much deeper than that. A poll that was done in the United States, and I'll just point out this point, between the white people and black people. That's all. It was before the first vaccination of Moderna came to the market. Will you take it or you will not take it? At the white population, especially the adult, the answer was yes at about 80%. At the black population, the answer was no at about 80%. Why? Because the black population doesn't trust the government. And we don't have to go to discrimination and to Alabama and to, discrimination and to the Tuskegee experiment in which, the black population was used as rabbit in experiment on syphilis and so on. They don't trust the government. So when you are coming to the public, it's not only a matter of education. When you are coming for mass vaccination, for example, it's a matter of trust, whether people trust what they are being told, whether the government is trustworthy. And in the eye of the black people in the United States, the answer is a big no, a big no. So it's not only education for the item, for the vaccination, it's education at large and building of trust between the governing body and the population. And that's what happened in the United States, that 40% of the people, and the same in China, by the way.
So I'm hearing education plus trust. That's what we need. Next question for this lady, please.
Hi, I'm Lani Davies from the Research School of Chemistry at the Australian National Uni. Alongside my PhD, I work at the country's first public pill testing site, and naturally that comes with a fair bit of media coverage. And I'm always quite concerned that journalists will take what I say out of context. So how do you guys deal with that? And if it does occur, how do you fix it?
So my advice would be, view the media as a multi-headed hydra. So there will be one face in front of you smiling, telling you how clever you are, how wonderful you are. Bear in mind there will be another 3 heads behind you waiting to bite you. So that there is no real loyalty, I have found, in the media. It is about creating the story. It is their job to create the story, to get the headlines, to sell. And I don't think I've ever seen a single quote that I've given verbatim appear in any article that's ever been written about me. Some of the things that I've done, I'm really surprised I've done, because they aren't true. and so I found out an awful lot about myself from the media. And so I think for me, it's ultimate caution, because you're not necessarily in control of what finally appears. That lies with somebody else. Now, if you have a trusted relationship with a journalist, that's incredibly powerful, because if they're a good journalist, they will come back to you with the article before it goes out and let you proofread it. If you can get to that level, that's the best you can hope for. But if you give a quote, you have to expect that's not what's going to appear in the paper tomorrow. So protect yourself and your science at all times.
Thank you.
There's the trust at the highest level.
I want to add a point on what Sue said. Some media outlets do not allow for fact-checking of the final version, because I just did an interview with CNBC and they told me we don't have that policy. We cannot show you the draft before we go live. So a very simple hack to protect yourself is to take an email interview. Because everything is in black and white, there is no dispute what was said or not said. There's no room for extrapolation. Next, this lady over here. We can't hear you. Maybe closer to the mic. Does the mic work?
Hello? Okay.
Excellent.
Works. Hi, my name is Kerstin. I'm at UCL in London and I'm working in cancer genomics. We already quickly talked about trust, but how do we build trust in science? Because, yeah, especially during COVID, we heard a lot about, I don't believe in science. Is it only on the governmental level, or do you think that science communication will also help with that?
Oh gosh, that you caught us. How do we build more trust? And that's also part of my 57% versus 81%. They clearly trust one party more than the other. If not, why would they say they want to talk to government first? Does any panelists want to add on that? A lot of silence on my...
I think if we knew the answer to that, we would have answered it. That's the trouble, is that there's not a simple, straightforward answer. Building trust is a really difficult thing. You can lose it incredibly swiftly. It's such a precious commodity if you have trust, but it takes an awful lot to build it, and you will never have trust with everybody. There will always be dissenters. But I think we shouldn't give up. So it might be very easy to say, oh, no one's going to trust us anyway, so there's no point. I don't think that's what we should do. I think we have to be dogged and determined about it, but about being honest to ourselves, and again, not going beyond our own areas of expertise. The minute we do that, people will lose trust in us. So I think it's about standing firm in our science and just being constant about it.
Thank you, Sue. I think Aaron brought up Dr. Anthony Fauci, and interestingly enough, everyone really trusted Dr. Fauci. So I think with scientists who have all that shoring up of trust, they should speak more. They should be our ambassadors, the evangelists for science. So that's probably my answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Gus. I'm from Imperial College London, a postdoc there looking at brain injuries in athletes. My question is sort of a question and a point. It's about, where does the onus for good science communication, where does that lie? I think at the moment from the panel, I'm kind of getting feedback that, there's a bit of reliance on the government to better educate, kind of have policies to better educate people as a whole. Do we rely on external science communicators to get our messages across? Or actually, as a fact, do we all here as scientists need to be better trained to be better science communicators? I think nowadays we can't get away with being bad science communicators. As we've heard, there's a lot more science skepticism prevailing around. If people don't trust the government and they trust scientists less, that's a real problem for us as a community. So I would kind of ask, how do we get around to, what onus lies on us as scientists to become better communicators? Do we need to do more courses? Do we need to be engaging with people who are actually going to be affected by our science communication in terms of journalists and public, rather than necessarily this is a bit of a bubble. We all sort of understand the science that we're communicating to each other, but do we need to do some more external engagement and training for all of us here?
Tim, please.
You triggered a raw point in my one day I was trying to help my younger daughter many years ago with her science homework. And it was a question of the adaptation of pine trees to growing in the frozen north. And frankly, I couldn't understand the book, which just gave a series of 5 facts that you had to memorize. And there was no explanation for why these things worked and helped the pine trees. And I honestly think that the whole problem starts in the schools, you know? I mean, that science education is just a series of facts you have to learn. And if you can learn a lot of facts and remember them, then you get a lot of points and you'll do terribly well in later life, as opposed to trying to understand how the world is. And I've no idea how you fix that, because it seems to be very deeply rooted, actually, that science is just about memorizing things.
Yeah, but trying to, again, to come back to the question and answer the question, whether is it everyone responsibility of every scientist to do science communication? The answer is yes. Should everyone do this? Probably not. But basically what you need to do is you need to say, same how we select scientists through the siphon from the school to the bachelor, master, PhD, postdoc, and so on. Same way we need to do with the science communicators. But if you don't try it, if you never tried it, you're never going to know whether you are good at it or not. So it's everyone. Let's put it this way: it's probably everyone's responsibility to try it once, and then whether you like it or not.
And I want to argue that it is not just altruistic or generous, because being able to communicate, having a professional brand is also very good for our own careers, you know, pitching for grant funding. When you're an assistant professor, a junior one like me, you need to convince top students to join your lab, and you have got no record. So you got to use all that you got, your persuasive skills, your communication skills, to get where you want to. So I would argue that yes, we all need to, you know, level up a little bit, just a little.
Thank you.
The lady over there.
Hello, my name is Fa. I'm a dental doctoral student at the University of Geneva, Switzerland. So my question is probably related to what my friends have asked. So there are many misleads and like faults, also like in the communication, and also as Dr. Chan mentioned that the public, they don't have access to scientific articles, and they choose to believe what influencers say. I think that is because it's so hard for them to access to the scientific papers. My dentist friend told me that like it's so hard to read scientific papers. It's easier to Google or now like use ChatGPT to ask. So my question is like, is there any way to make the scientific papers be more precise? And like, because now it's like introduction, material and method and discussion. And I think now we have to change that, like it's too long, it's too hard to read. Is there, you think it can be more precise, or it should be the way it is? Thank you.
And nature has become totally unreadable in my experience.
Yeah.
No, but so because you don't mean more precise, but more accessible to the general public without the loss of information and without the loss of precision. And of course, so first of all, I agree, very difficult to get those papers. Even in NUS, you have to click so many buttons to get into the message that the university doesn't have a subscription for this journal. Yes, that's a big, and then it's about 10 more clicks if it does have a subscription. So that's a big problem. It has to be resolved somehow. But of course, lots of journals do have now visual abstract or some in PNAS. What they do, this few sentence layman summary.
You still got to sort of,
and so on.
It's not the answer, I don't think.
Well, but at least those are the steps. But what people are doing now, and I think it's very, very curious, is that you don't store scientific papers anymore, but you store models. And now Leslie is going to kill me for this, but if you can store the large language models of the papers which are precise, and I don't know how to fix the precision, then you can do some mathematical operations with them, and you can actually. So if you store a model, you can rewrite it in different terms, and you can indefinitely expand it. And I think it's only started now, but I think it's a very interesting idea. And if we can, especially if we can do some I don't know, tensor algebra on those large language models, then we can do some very interesting things with the models rather than the papers.
Do you know if I mean, is the entire scientific literature in those large language models?
I don't think so. No,
none of it.
No, some, but not
subset.
Maybe you need to create like a chatbot for your field, dental science, and then answer some of the very important questions on your chatbot. That would be cool. Next question, please.
Hello. My name's Liam Hanlon. I'm Australian, but I'm currently working at the University of Paris in Saclay. I was going on what Aaron mentioned before about how, say, for example, Trump was spreading misinformation in science. And one thing that occurred to me is that one thing that he has on top of his campaign is a whole bunch of, say, media relations specialists and public relations specialists and maybe even social media specialists who join his campaign as a politician. And I wonder if maybe any of you have considered doing something similar, like reaching out to a professional in social media or something, in like an influencer who knows how to deal with this kind of stuff, to get their advice and how to build your own brand or the brand of science in general.
Before my speakers answer that, did you know that they analyzed the 30,000 words that Donald Trump used as a president when he first entered office, and they discovered his vocabulary level was that of a 4th grader? Yeah, which isn't bad. That goes to show how simple you need to communicate to have a lot of people understand you, and clearly our level of vocabulary might be a little bit higher than 4th grader. On that note, I think your question is, do we need to get the advice of experts on how to communicate on social media?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Why not? Some media training, perhaps?
I think it's a vicious circle. All the questions are somehow related to one another. If people are not interested in science, then the papers, the newspapers and the media will not go to science because they will not sell it. They will not look at the advertisement, and that cycle precipitates itself. Somebody has to come in and break this cycle. Now the question is who is going to be? If a politician will hire a real expert in science and will go to the campaign with a real scientist or somebody who understands what's going on, if it's not interesting to the public, then this politician will not be elected. So again, we are in a vicious circle, and I think that it all comes at the end to education from early age. That's what I believe. If we shall rear the next generation, that I don't talk about science, understanding biology, understanding photosynthesis or why the blood is red, but understanding the truth, facts, and not listening, be very careful about, actually we are in an uphill battle against fake news. Beforehand, maybe people were not interested in science, but they were not under an avalanche of lies before we had the cell phone and the social network. Now we are under an avalanche of lies, and of everybody can disseminate whatever they want. So, but somebody has to really break this cycle because it's all over the place. It's all over the place. It has to do with sales. It has to do with money. Only very serious newspaper, take the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Guardian, only there you will find a nice, at the end of the week, at the weekend, section on science. All the others, nothing. They are interested in rapes, in fires, in floods, in human disasters, in I don't know what.
I think there is a fundamental problem of the numbers that there might be multiple miscommunication, misled news, the fake news, and so on. But we know that there is one true solution, and the worst is that we don't know this. What is the solution? So how do you fight those guys on their territory? So we have to bring them on our territory.
Thank you. This lady over here, please.
My name is Shuwen Yuan. I'm Chinese. I'm studying in the University of Tokyo. And actually, I want to say that I'm doing science, but I feel in other area, not my area, I'm studying in the biochemistry. I just like normal people. Like in the hospital, I feel few people talk with me in scientific way. They just teach me how to use this one, how to do, but they didn't explain how it works. Sometimes I ask, but I didn't feel they are patiently explain how it works. And I couldn't, not so easy to find some information they supply about how it works. And I was wondering, is it a good way to supply some scientific information? It's no wonder people, no matter people care or not in some way. And I also wondering, like, I feel different area has different distance between the public in science. Like some company do some launch event to introduce their new products in some professional way, but some area don't do that kind of thing. I was wondering, is it not worth to do, or we should learn from other area? Yeah, thank you.
I think if you feel that way, then other people like my mom, my dad might feel even more afraid when they go to the clinic because they have almost zero scientific knowledge. I think the question of this lady here is, how do we, make decisions, maybe healthcare, medical decisions, when we go into the clinic and the doctor maybe has, 2 minutes to get the diagnosis out and in and out. I think, is that right? Like, how do we grapple with a lack of information with healthcare decisions and so on?
It's very difficult, though, to explain lots of things. I mean,
Yeah.
I've recently had that problem because our hot water supply stopped at home, and I didn't understand how the heat exchanger worked, and had to call in a plumber. But I knew I could look on Google for the instruction manual of this thing that we had, and it was totally incomprehensible to me. And then that reminds you, I used to read these when computers first came, you would have these computer manuals, and they would say, this is a keyboard, and if you press the letter A, and letter A will appear on the screen. You say, well, I think I know that. But very quickly, you get to a point where you absolutely can't understand. It gets too technical. So I think with everything, it's incredibly difficult to find the right level of explanation.
Yes.
Yes. Because I don't know what your background is and what you understand and what you don't. I mean, it goes back to my ambassador problem, actually. If I say protein, it probably means steak to you, or it suggests enzyme to me. That sort of thing. So I must say I loved. I broke my leg in Okinawa, and which is why I have a stick. And the doctor who was looking after me was absolutely wonderful, because he actually said, I had very low blood pressure, and we just sat up in bed. I almost fainted. They couldn't figure it out. This doctor was great, because he said, I really don't know what's wrong with you. No British doctor would ever have done that. They always sort of tried to pretend they know everything. And I really appreciate it. And he said, well, we'll try this. We'll put these socks on you, and they maybe keep more of the blood up top and stuff like that. And I was with him every inch of the way with these experiments, most of which didn't work, but I got better anyway. And so that was terrific and rather unusual. But he spoke excellent English and was sort of a research-minded kind of. We were on the same wavelength, and I think that's what's important, But it's very hard to achieve because you don't know who the audience is.
Exactly. Thank you. We have to keep our questions short because we only have 10 minutes, and we can take a couple more. This lady over here.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Warwick. My research area is ultrasonics and non-destructive testing. Within our group, we do a lot of outreach for high school age children, sometimes below, and we find that physically getting the children in to do experiments and actually having that physical interaction is a lot better than, say, any digital attempt would be. Do you feel that maybe the digital age is kind of preventing us from inspiring future young scientists as we go forward?
Yes, very much so. I think sort of hands-on is the thing, actually. And all this sort of idea that you can get everything off a flat screen is rubbish.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, while in Singapore, try to visit the Science Center. So it's one of the best hands-on scientific museums I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ewan Smithers from the University of Cambridge, and I wanted to ask, how do you fight the boring stigma? Because I was taking part in an outreach event the other day, and it was like young teenagers interested in science, and I was like, are you interested in biology? And they was like, yes. And I was like, are you interested in plants? I'm a plant scientist. And they was like, oh, no. And I'm also a mathematician, so the stigma against that is even worse. So like, how do you fight that initial, like, them just shutting down?
A plant mathematician.
Deadly combination. Yeah. Give up.
I think we need to ask the cool scientists for that.
I think we need here a big round of applause to support his self-esteem. I think it's really fascinating combination. What's not to like?
Maybe we need to ask the cool scientist here, the forensic scientist. How we need to rehabilitate the plant mathematician's image. How do we make him cool, he's asking.
Okay, so I failed maths, and I hated botany. So I'm the wrong person to ask. I think it comes down to you in many ways, because when you do a face-to-face and you do outreach, as the lady from Warwick was saying, you know, it's the relationship that you build with them. They'll stop looking at you as a particular beast and see you as yourself, and that's what becomes cool. So it comes down to you. You can make anything cool. Anything.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
know.
you can. Yeah, you can.
No, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, you can.
Because I've heard several in these GAYSS. One of the great beauties of them is occasionally you get talks by proper mathematicians. I mean, real hardcore mathematicians, and they always amuse me very much because they are totally incomprehensible. I mean, they,
No, you see, I disagree with you. So in my college in Oxford, I have mathematicians who are the funniest people that I've come across, with great personality.
Well, I had a
that can actually hold a conversation across the lunch table on maths that I can understand, and I failed.
We need a mathematician
I failed. The only
here
exam I
to
ever
stand up
failed
for
was a
them.
maths exam. And I once sat next to a young research fellow in my college, and I said, so, you know, what do you, mathematician, I knew. So he said, well, I'm really only interested in numbers between 0 and 1. And that was it. You know, I mean, what can you say?
I hope you recorded this, because it already shows you how exciting is your.
We have faith in you. We have faith in you.
Thank you.
Make math great again. This gentleman here.
Greetings, professors. I'm Ye Zhang from Hiroshima University in Japan. My research work is concrete science and mainly about designing superior quality construction materials. However, sometimes when I try to seek cooperation with industrial engineering companies, I receive rejections because my work is more than sufficient, is more than what they need, and they are not willing to pay the price. So my question is, sometimes when our findings and works exceed the need of general public too much, does that mean we are going in a wrong direction, and how should we fix that problem? Thank you.
The question is about an industry academic fit, you know, how can we collaborate with industry?
I think you can always find a twist. Tell those concrete producers that you will declare them to the Green Committee in the Parliament, and then they will be screwed unless they invent some new types of concrete which emit less CO2. Any story have got an interesting twist, and I'm sure you can find one in the construction industry as well.
But also, could you find out what they need? Because sometimes academics create solutions in search of a problem. So maybe it's also good to know what they need and you know, find a way to collaborate with them where you are. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank
On
you.
to the next lady.
Hi, I'm Alina Begley. I'm an American analytical chemist at ETH Zurich. And my question is about digitalization for scientists communicating with other scientists. So what impact do you think digitalization has had on scientific publications over the last 20 years? And do you think that the quality of science is like maintained? And if not, what effect do you think that might have on the public's trust?
Are you thinking maybe even about open access? Because if you're just talking about PDFs, then yeah, that's great. But are you referring to like open access? Because that's.
I think I was maybe thinking more like the number of publications has
The volume.
exploded
The volume.
over the last 20 years, and
there's too much to know.
No, I think it's so I think the question is exactly right, that of course the easiness and the convenience of how we access scientific knowledge improved dramatically over the last 30 years, but at the same time it became so much easier to publish, and all those little funny publishers appear who publish strange quality papers, and that created its own problem.
You think we're drowning in rubbish?
We are.
Little publons, they call them, units of publications. You dice it up into many small little publons.
But I mean, there is a problem here, isn't it? Because I mean, we do just know so much more. I mean, in my lifetime, it's absolutely amazing the advances in biology. I can't speak for the physicists, but I mean, to be an expert, you have to really specialize down and drill down and drill down. And whereas I think when I was learning biology, there was so much unknown that you could sort of grasp almost the DNA, RNA, and proteins were pretty mysterious in those days. Now they're not.
I think I have another point to add to this question, which is because there's just a huge amount of volume of publications, right? It's almost that people can't find your papers anymore. So the notion that build and they will come is not true anymore. You almost need to write about your papers, tweet about it, share about it before anyone can even know you published anything. Right? There's just too many of them.
Can we ask the audience, Duncan, how many papers do you publish a year?
Okay, 1 to 5, raise your hand.
2 or 3. Okay. So this is the quality. So in analytical chemistry, so your previous supervisor, how many papers? In analytical chemistry, I'm sure it will be tens, dozens, right? So answers your question. 2 or 3, high quality, and then we just put whatever.
How many scientists are there in the world, do you suppose, publishing?
I think papers? That's the problem, because
I mean, it's astronomical, right?
Well, this is a data deluge for sure. This lady, please.
Hi, my name is Nafisa Ibrahim, and I'm from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I'm a chemistry PhD student working in electrochemistry. So my question is actually really along those same lines, and I'm really wondering if we will ever move away from that mindset of publish or perish, or what needs to change in order for there not to be thousands of papers published within a month that again is all not good quality science. So what needs to happen in order for high quality science to be valued, and should we move away from H-index and so on and so forth? So
this will be our last question from the audience. So who wants to answer this? How do we move away from publish or perish?
Well, I don't, the trouble is it really is publish or perish. I mean, if you don't find stuff out, who's going to pay you to do research? And how do we know if you find stuff out if you don't tell the world about it? I mean, it's pretty simple, I think,
the truth.
Actually. I mean, it's
fair enough.
Does anyone dissent from that?
I mean, in my time, so how they teach us. I mean, in physics, you write one short PRL, physical review letters, and then there should be a very long one where you explain everything, physical review B. So that's the standard. So one message and letter and one long explanation with all the facts, not splitting it into individual little pieces which are disconnected from each other, but write a nice story. So and I think it was very nice style. We ran away from it long time ago, but how to push people to come back to it, I have no idea. But they used to be nice, beautiful standards there.
I think it will only happen if they stop focusing on the number of papers we publish, because that leads to other detrimental outcomes as well. You know, focusing on the number of papers we publish per year as a metric for bonuses or promotions.
But it's very variable from field to field, isn't it? I mean, that's another problem. I mean, clinical scientists, I mean, they have stacked papers this high because every case is a new paper. Where I remember one guy,
engineers as well.
He'd published one nice paper in the EMBO journal, and his clinical supervisor said, "You are hopeless," So what was good by one standard was absolutely hopeless by another, and actually vice versa. I mean,
Indeed.
Yeah, but that's also about science communication, because nice papers you read like a book, like a story, and it's we see less and less number of such beautiful papers which anyone can read.
Well, I thought we end our panel on an optimistic, inspiring note. I'd like to invite 4 of my panelists to end with a short phrase or sentence inspiring the young scientists here to share their knowledge with their loved ones or their communities or people interested in their field. Who would like to start? Just a note to give them.
Well, I think it is good to try to explain things to your grandmother. I mean, I approve of that.
Explain things to your grandmother. I like that one. Thank you, Sir.
Okay, my grandmother's dead.
So is mine.
So that aside, and not going into the other side of the world, I think for me it's about having passion. It's about having that. If it's in your soul and you have to get it out there and do it really with commitment. And certainly for me, it was a teacher that made me a scientist. And he was so committed. He was such a gorgeous teacher that was what gave me the passion to do it. You need to be that teacher and to get your
I love
passion
that.
out.
Thank you, Dame Sue Black.
I'm actually happy that we lifted this pressure from the young scientists that they must do the communication. But what they definitely must do it at least to try. It's the unknown. If you never try it, you never know.
Try. I like that one. Thank you, Professor.
I think that nature is the best artist that has ever walked on the face of Earth. It's so beautiful. It's so complicated. Think about the human being, how complicated it is. So it's kind of a shame not to enjoy it. And as you said, it's passion. And you need perseverance, right? You need a lot of patience too. But it's, the reward is amazing, even of a small discovery. For me, that's the place. I replaced it with the operating theater. So I moved away from curing or trying to cure people to the beauty of nature.
Passion, perseverance, share the beauty of nature. I love that, Professor.
And thanks for your great questions.
Yeah, and on that note, my name is Juliana Chan. Follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram. And thank you for your 90 minutes of your attention. Thank you, everyone. Have a great first day. Thank you. Thank you, speakers.